very good. Let's start with the questions from the audience.
Actually, I have a few questions. One question would be, so you have a network of warriors because they're fighting each other. Wouldn't it also make sense to have within this network a network of friends? I mean, you have somehow a warrior fights one warrior, fights another warrior, and you can argue that they might be friends, or if you haven't done your co-reference right, they might be actually the same person.
Well, should I?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think one could say two things. First of all, it's up to you to say how many communities you would like to have. So if you have, if you say, I want only 3 communities, then you will have very rough communities. If you have, let's say, 20 communities, you certainly will have communities of different kinds. For example, also friends. So if you're interested in these things in finer grained communities, it's you have to adjust the number of communities you want to find. But actually, it's up to the computer to find the communities. So if it is not able to identify friends, well, I cannot show it on this plot, but I had on another occasion. Maybe it's even visible on this bigger. Oh no, it's not really visible. But I had a similar plot where actually I had such a number of communities that the allies were in one community. But this is you have to experiment with a number of communities you would like to have on your plot.
Yeah, it's more like somehow you have a community of people where you mark people hating each other instead of liking each other somehow. It seems to me somehow...
I mean, it's not that I make the community, the computer establishes the community. It's not that I want to have this or that kind of community. It's just that the computer is looking for the relations, and it finds many... Oh, let's perhaps go back to the relations. Sorry, it's a bit cumbersome. Okay, now we have this. So, well, we're looking for the relation topics, and you see there is no topic friendship here. But probably if you would give the computer the task to find 20 relation topics, you would also find some small topic friendship, but it does not seem to be very important in the text. In the sense that there are not so many talk about friendship, apparently. But I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question.
No.
Just to get that further on, do you have any possibility to say, okay, I would like to have a group that evolves around a specific sort of word, like for example, friendship and enemy, and could you then say, okay, try to just find me 2 groups for that?
I think in a way that is what we did afterwards with the semantic context networks. That is really a method to go more into detail and to look at particular words and how they appear in the text. And while this is more than a general overview about the kinds of relations that you have. And of course, these diagrams never answer everything, but they might be useful to experiment and highlight some specific aspects without interfering too much. And of course, sometimes you want to interfere because you have a specific question that you want to look at, and then you can go more into detail or select only several texts or use a different method altogether. But what we like about this method is that it gives you an interesting first impression without interfering too much already. And to just let the material structure itself regarding to certain criteria, of course. And maybe these criteria don't match your question, then it's not useful using that. But for some questions, I think they give an interesting picture that you might not have gotten otherwise.
If I may add just one word, because well, we don't have a topic called friendship, but we have a topic that's called battle, and well, that may be a bit counterintuitive, but I said these topics are not particularly intuitive always. If you look at the persons, if you know the text and you look at the persons that are connected by this topic of battle, then that does not mean that they are fighting each other. That means that they are fighting with each other. They are actually allies. So in a way, one might say that kind of aspect, at least, of this friendship topic is already in this one. But well, I must admit that I have to explain this.
I was wondering about the body parts and the example of Horus in the pyramid text, because I did not understand how they fit in the different colors and why I think arm was blue and that was with the environment and building terms, and mouth was violet, purple, and was with the gods. I did not get why that is. Heart and mouth are purple.
Yes, that's because heart and mouth, they occur in the same context like the other purple ones. And arm, for example, it occurs in the same context like heaven, Re, earth, and Ka or day.
Mm-hmm.
So they group in different communities. They are all around Horus, but in different context meanings. And different pyramid spells, for example.
And context means in different spells or in different paragraphs of the spells? Is that related to the closeness of the words? Like, I don't know, 10 words in between or 50 words in between?
Yeah. In some way it is. So the algorithm that we used takes a 5-word window. So you have a window of 5 words around the one that you're looking for, but it favors closer words. So if you have a word appearing closer to the one that you're looking at, then it gets a higher weight, which is like the thickness of the line. So yeah, in a way we do that, and then this context, it is what evolves if you add these relations for a large group of texts. Then you notice, okay, there might be actually texts where arm is connected to atum. I don't know if there is a text like that, but it might be the case. But in the majority of cases, arm and atum are not so close together, but rather arm is connected to maybe heaven or something like that. So it is like, of course you don't get all the detail, but you get some general hints about what might be actually closer together in the text. And of course, these network diagrams never really answer your questions. They just give you hints. They give you things to look at and to study more in detail. Because it is very rough to say this node is either green or either blue or yellow. And of course, often it's like in between. But we can't show it here. So it is like one possible segmentation of your network. And it gives you one possible answer to your question. But it is also just a starting point to say, so why is it that heaven and arm are so close? So where does that actually appear in the text? What's the meaning behind this? And then, of course, you can answer that question with the network alone, but then you have to go into the text again and see what's actually written there. Can you just
I was wondering, are you going to make it an open database? Like, for example, for the hearing text, I would like to know about Orion and Sirius and how are connected to the rest. Like to make a search, something like that.
We'd like to, but the text material itself doesn't belong to us because it's property of the Academy of Sciences in Berlin. What we do is we publish the tools that we use. And we are actively talking to the people owning the data to allow users to apply these tools to their text. But we don't intend on publishing the data themselves because that's not our position to do. But we want to make everything open that we can and allow users to experiment with it and also apply to different texts and so on. Yeah. So we already have a GitHub page where you can download all the code that we wrote to do this. Yeah.
I have more questions. I
think that was one.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Just for clarification, you just said that you have your 5-word window, or maybe you can change it. Is it in sentences or in paragraphs, or is it going over, for example, 2 paragraphs?
No, it's in sentences.
Okay.
So, yeah. We actually did like a 3-step process. We selected all the texts that Horace appeared in and left all others out completely. Then we looked, then we took all the sentences and within the sentences we applied the 5-word window. Yeah, that's actually the process. But you can adjust that always and experiment with it. But that's what we did. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions concerning the topic relation part. So one is, so you said the like topic modeling, you assign, so a human being assigns a label to the set of, to the topic.
Yeah.
Have you tried comparing how different people perceive the different topics? So like what in linguistics they do with the inter-analytical agreement to see if 2 specialists disagree or they pretty much assign the same levels. I would be interested just to know if
we haven't,
there
but I agree, that's a very good idea, but of course the problem is we have only one Indologist on the team,
yes.
So I'm a bit monopoly there, but of course that would be a very interesting point, but actually I'm not sure how important it is to give a title. I mean, for this talk it is important in order for you to understand more or less what it's about, but sometimes in a way, the program is always right. I mean, it just does what it does and gives an output and gives clusters of words that somehow belong together. And sometimes a human being can make sense out of it, and sometimes a human being has bigger problems, but that does not mean, of course, that this second result is wrong. Maybe it's even in a way more interesting, but of course it would be very interesting to have different persons. But I must say I'm not really confident with these. I just have to give a title, and I thought these titles are not completely beside the mark, but they're not. I mean, you have lots of words, and you always have words that do not really fit. And so
yeah, I mean, with topic modeling sometimes it's really hard to see what a topic is about. And is it the same that you have to set before starting algorithm the number of topics you want?
Yeah, well, actually, yes. In the case
or
of Nabi, in the case of Nabi, you have to give the exact number of topics you want, and then we did several experiments. And I found out that just for this purpose, this 7-5 worked out quite well. But one has to add, it's always more complicated, that there is a kind of randomness built in. So even if you give the same number and the same text and everything is the same, then the topics are different a bit more. Well, sometimes they're a bit different, sometimes they're quite different. So this is quite But this is just because it's the way these programs work. They have a kind of probability mechanism, and sometimes well, it turns out that the main words are more or less stable, but then with the less frequent words there are some changes.
Interesting. That's also true if you run the same algorithm twice.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you say the name of the algorithm again? Because I can't.
Yeah, it's NUBBI, and this is short for
Networks uncovered by Bayesian inference, and it's also by the Bly team that did the LDA topic modeling algorithm. And they experimented with various ways as how to apply it, and one experiment was this network algorithm. And you find a paper on it, and you find an R package.
It's an R package, but we must say we had to work quite hard to get it. So if you would like to use it, just please get in touch with us, and then we tell you how to do it, because it's really tricky.
We'll blog about it.
More questions?
I have two questions on the heaven in this example. First, is heaven the Egyptian word het, or are all Egyptian words for heaven collected here in the English equivalent? And the second question is, there's a specific relation between heaven and Re, and I think this is not only in all texts belonging to Rose, but in very Egyptian relation. So do we need a corrective? So all Egyptian words in a network to see what is statistically significant?
So first, the first question. Heaven, we just have one lemma each word. So heaven, I think it's pet. We don't have the other words. Just the English translation for pet. So we didn't want to bore you with the Egyptological expressions. Yes, and the second question, of course, Re and heaven, they have a connection in general. And if you like to see how Re is connected, yeah, you should do the network for Re, and then look if the connection to heaven is quite strong as it is here in this network, or if it's even stronger.
Yes.
Yeah, one other question is, you were showing the string that describes a text with one hole in it, and is this some topological thing where you can say, well, the string has a hole and that means two plots, and would three plots at the same time can give rise to two holes, or is this something that you can generalize or not, or what happens here?
What here happens, we don't know exactly, because it's the first time we saw that strange looking network, and yeah, it's just you have to look into the text and see what happens. And if you look at the little stories here, you can see you have to interpret the network with Egyptological knowledge.
We discussed it a bit because it was quite striking. I've actually never seen a network shaped like this before. And so we discussed, so is it always that this text plot algorithm displays actually the plot structure so clearly? What we think is that this is actually a quite short text. Like most Egyptian texts are quite short when you apply computational methods to them. And we believe that for shorter text, it's closer actually to the plot structure. If you have a larger text, then these structures blur, and you get more like the central, like semantic groups or poles or whatever. So for example, the guy who wrote this, he has an essay online, David McClure, about mental maps of text, and he starts with War and Peace. and the novel. And he shows like there's actually then two large poles, which is war and which is peace, and then you have a smaller one which is like excursus about historiography and things like that, and history. So you get rather a three-pole shape, which is less clearly structured like this, but it's a much larger text, of course.
How short is short?
You can say that.
It's about 8,000 words, I think, in this dimension.
So approximately in which is it around 8 to 10,000 words when the graph representation, the network representation follows the plot structure? What would be the value, the number? You don't know.
We don't know.
Okay.
It's quite a new tool, and we have to do more experiments. I mean, we did the thing with the Mahabharata, which is of course much longer, like 1.5 million, and then we get something more similar to this War and Peace. So probably somewhere in between. One just have to check that out.
Okay.
Please,
Yeah, on which languages did you work? You had the Egyptian example was the English translation, but did you use it on the ancient Egyptian? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, second question, if there's kind of a certain role of probability within this algorithm, then these results then are not really reproducible, are they? Or to what extent? Because when you interpret these wonderful mappings, it seems like it makes sense in a way. That you have the arm, the mouth, and the eye. But if I don't know the story, I would say like, okay, so it's about someone losing his arm and on the way to heaven or falling down the ladder. It's like it's a bit maybe. Yeah, could you first ask me the question of how reproducible are these examples and these results?
Technically speaking, they are reproducible if you set the same random seed. So the idea is that the algorithms don't want to start with a given order of items, because that might be a bias in your run. So what they start is they shake it around and randomly order everything, and then they start doing what they do. And the main characteristics should be stable, otherwise they would be meaningless. But of course, if you start from looking from a different angle on the same material, then even if you sort things, you might get a slightly different result. So this is why there's always this kind of randomness built in. So I'd say, so first of all, if you see no reproducible structure at all, then I think it's a sign that the algorithm doesn't work in this case. So, but if you have some sort of stable structure and just small things change, then I think it looks like science, but it isn't science. It's still an humanistic enterprise. And I think it's just a heuristic device to get started and to start playing around with your material and look at it in a new way. And so I think all of this is valuable, but you just have to do it, and you have to play around with it. And you can't just say, so this is what we found out, and this is once and for all. But it's more like, the way of applying this to your text. I think that's the valuable step, not what comes out in the end exactly.
Can you? So you mentioned at the beginning, especially with names, you had problems of co-references and of disambiguation. Do you have any idea what kind of error rate you have there, and is there any theory of that describes or tries to describe the consequences for the network if you have many errors? For example, with the warriors, that one person is fighting another one and another one, and the first and the third turn out to be the same, and you just didn't realize this. And are there any specific ideological or Egyptological problems in there?
Well, I'm not sure about any theories and numbers. I would just, wanted to somehow practically proceed, and we had lists of names with references, and I just, partly did it manually in such a way that I, for example, when I knew as a reader that there is a certain ambiguity, but it's an ambiguity like 100 times this means this epithet is applied to hero A, and 3 times it's applied to hero B. Then, for example, I just said, okay, that's hero B, that's hero A, and such practical doing it. But I'm not sure about how to calculate this and how to calculate the error, because it's also not very clear. Well, the error rate in this case would be, of course, 3% in a way, but I'm not sure about how that does mean for the network in the end. Because even I'm say the material is so vast, and these I'm not sure if this is a typical Sanskrit problem, but it is a very, very difficult problem, and you have so many epithets, so many heroes. Then if you get the thing more or less right for the main protagonist, then I think you can be quite happy. And I think we managed to do that because at least looking at several trials and looking at the kinds of connections and so on, I didn't notice any major faults. But this is probably, if you look closer and if you look at the less frequent persons and so on, then the number of errors grows.
Yeah, one more.
I just start talking more than
Sorry.
I mean, for checking what errors are or not, you have to check the distant reading by reading. More or less, it's what you said. So distant reading, in my personal opinion, opens a big door. It makes things viewable in a way that specifically for classical philology, I can't talk about Egyptian studies, but classical philology was something that I also cannot talk about classical philology because I'm an archaeologist, but in my impression, classical philology has been something that has been done since Petrarca and before. It has been done all the time, since antiquity, more or less. And it was, so to say, canon building art, but the canon building is also the problem, because people really build on each other for thousands of years with the same, more or less the same look at Herodotus or so, or at Cicero or whatever. And it was very difficult to break out of these kinds of repetition cycles of analyzing text. Naturally, every generation had a little change here or a little change there, but it was more or less merely a repetition cycle. And that's, these kinds of things just smash a hole in the wall, so to say, if it's not a window, and you just can feel invited to start to look at things from another angle. And that was what was missing in many of his studies. Naturally, the distant reading concept in itself has been very provocating. It means stop read by, you can't understand literature. If you want to understand literature, stop reading. That was the basic message of distant reading, and actually that wasn't meant very much in earnest, but it was to apply another new way of looking at it. But these looks have to be done then, you know, and you have, as you said, you have to check if this figure that comes out of an algorithm makes sense or not. That's what you have to do in data analysis anyway, not only in this kind of analysis, also in data mining, in every analysis. And if you create a pattern that makes sense in a way or not, can be just said after you check the pattern with your, so to say, traditional methodologies, if you can find the sense in it or not. And if you can find the sense in it, then the pattern has pushed you to something that you didn't imagine before. If it doesn't make sense, then either the sources are too bad or it is an artifact that is nothing. And after you did this, you can probably count the errors by reading the distant reading model. Just with normal reading, you can count the errors, and then you can probably build a theory. But on that occasion that you are now on that stage, it is hard to do, and as wishable a theory about error measuring might be, it's hard to do it automatically, and so it can be the next step then in 10 years or so, when the first distant reading models have been checked through and through, then you can refine it, and then you can also probably put up a theory, a mathematical theory about error, reasons for errors, consequences of errors, prevention of errors, and whatever.
I guess that was more of a comment, which I'm grateful for, but we don't have to respond to that. I
It
guess.
was just
Thank you. It was.
Or if I
Yeah.
understood your
Yeah, it was
right.
basically what we wanted to say. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, completely agree with the question actually. Have you asked someone who has never read the story to retell the story by looking at this map?
Not yet.
Okay, I mean, and
But I can try to.
excuse me.
I will try.
You understand where I'm leading
Mhm.
with this? That this could be a simple procedure to check if the algorithm has done its job, basically. I guess. Thank you. So you can compare it to the original, of course. That's what I thought. You got the idea. Okay.
I would have one small question somehow, and that was about this example of this god who doesn't know where he wants to be. This Yama, god of death, where he said he was more grouped with the warriors by the algorithm. And is this an example of something that is unintelligible or not? Well, that you were using in the topic modeling context. And you also said that you have done some post-processing there. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would say this is not unintelligible. I would say this is actually one of the interesting points, because if the program just tells me what I already know, I can say, oh, that's nice, but, well, I mean, I can of course then leave it away. No, actually, and that was the reason that I looked at these example, and that's what we of course constantly did. If we found something that was interesting, strange, and so on, then we went to the text and looked, and it works like that you can do it. Yeah, so you can just look at the contexts that were responsible for putting Yama there, and then first thing I noticed that quite often you have this expression sent to Yama's abode, meaning to kill, and we thought that this is actually, well, kind of a different role there, and therefore we just left these expressions out, and still he was classified there. And actually, I must say I haven't checked this. Well, of course, that would be a natural step, and I certainly will do that when I find some time to look why Yama nevertheless was closer connected with the other gods. And I think this is not, well, this is maybe a bit surprising, but not so very much, because Yama is a very special figure, and well, everyone, even not thinking about this text, would say that Yama is a bit a special case, and as the god of death, and so on and so on. So he is a bit of an outsider. So it's not so very strange to put him there. But in order to find out exactly why he has this place, you have to go to the text, and you have to look at the context, and then you can figure it out. But of course, that you need some time to do that, because it's a big text, and you always have probably a couple of hundred of verses that are responsible, and you have to read them, and you have to, well, and so on and so on.
I think, yeah, last two questions, and then we move to the one.
Okay. Do you have a possibility to link back from the results of the algorithm, so from the graph we get, to the texts that are responsible for the node? So you don't.
Yes, as I said, we can do this manually by just looking up the text and looking at the lines, but there are more sophisticated methods.
We actually pretend. Oh, it's the Beamer resolution is too small. Okay, but I'll try nevertheless. This is a very, very rough first prototype. Maybe. Yeah, it works like this. And it's not Egyptian, not Indian, it's just a German fairy tale. But this is basically where we want to end. It's a double pane view where you have the network on one side and the text itself on the other side. And the idea is that you can, of course, you can choose one node, which is here the king, and you get all the passages where the king is mentioned. But we wanted to go further. And for example, now it's a bit a usability issue because the edges are so small, but if we choose the link of the sun to the maid, then you also get the exact passage where the relation between the two is mentioned. And a tool like this should allow you to really study it and really go back and forth. And we have the data, so we always took care that when we export a network, we always carry the information where exactly in the source is this relation mentioned. But we haven't yet a really usable interface for this, except for this prototype. Yeah.
But I think this is going very much in the direction that Rainer suggested of combining, which is obvious to network analysis, combining the close reading and the distant reading. So it's very interesting. Yes.
It's also still a bit around the topic of interpreting the topic models. As I remember, once colleagues from Europeana, they used electronic reasoning in order to map different thesauri or ontology mapping, basically. And their findings were that when they trained their machines very well, they had brilliant outcomes. But then when they switched to an unknown ontology, then their methods were usually as good as like comparing strings. But the difference was that the human user would immediately understand why two strings were mapped, why it was sometimes very hard to understand why two, like, through electronic reasoning, two ontological entities were mapped. So my question is, background, how understandable are these topic models for you when you know the text? How well, to what extent do you understand, okay, I have these knots, I have these edges, I understand very well why they exist there, why the knots have this size? or is there a lot of wondering for yourself, why does the algorithm produce this outcome?
It depends on the text you are looking at. We tried a little bit around, and we thought that the text should be from the same genre. So we tried to mix medical texts, literary texts, and pyramid spells, and this one was very hard to get some information out, and I was wondering why are they connected and why are the nodes that big. So it is sometimes hard to get the information out of that topic model. But yeah, if you do it from same corpus, then it is much easier. So I think you can't do it with all texts and look how Horus is characterized throughout all. I would think.
I think that in general, one of the advantages of network analysis is that in most cases it's quite easy to get the basic idea, because there's not so much computation involved actually. So the relations, why two nodes are related, it's really easy to explain, and you can do it with pen and paper basically. The topic modeling algorithm it's much more technical, and it's more difficult for somebody not with a computer science background to really understand what's happening. And I think there it's just then it's useful if you get an idea and if it helps you think about it. But I think then it's more difficult for somebody without a computer science background to really understand what's going on there. But I think that most of the network analysis things are quite straightforward.
Great. If there are no further questions, we can move to the point. Let me thank you again. Also for sharing real work in progress work. I really appreciate that. Thank you.